Good evening. My name is T.S. McNally. This World in Review, we're going to be covering a bit of a rant about a particular thing that has gotten me a bit angry in regards to a response to the shooting at Orlando, Florida, and for the people and to the tragedy and all that that had happened, and basically a callous and stupid response. And I already went over the fact that I don't really get angry about political discussion. The pro-gun movement, anti-gun movement, pro-immigration movement, anti-immigration movement, and these debates on how to resolve crises like this happening earlier, these discussions are going to happen amongst the people, and because they need to happen amongst the people, and the people are not, they're not, they come from varying backgrounds, education, they express themselves, and that's what they should be doing. Whether they're in the wrong or the right, that we still live on, and we should have these discussions. I'm not even angry about the other tweet that I talked about in the previous video. That was in the Sombrance video. You can see that here. That incidentally hoax that occurred in this fandom. This is not what this video is about. This video, I'm going to get right to the gist of it, because this needs to be said, and it needs to be said loud and clear. The tweet that made me angry, I will quote to you, but first I must say this. 13 scores and 7 years ago, in the midst of a tragedy, fallen Americans laid upon the hills, and a man stood before the fallen. He was expected to make a statement from his position, and he said what he said. There is nothing he could do or say that could bring more honor to those individuals who were fallen than he could present. There was nothing he could do. This was, in essence, this was not his time. This was not his time to take away through his words, or to try to believe that he could give them any greater honor than just their actions had given themselves. And 13 score and 7 years ago, people applauded him for that, because people expect their leaders to say something, but they also expect to know the sacrifices that people make for their mistakes, for the failures of politics to come to a peaceful resolution. 13 score and 7 years later, that man back then, 13 score and 7 years ago, was Abraham Lincoln on the fields of Gettysburg. And that was the Gettysburg Address. It is one of the most known speeches within American politics. And it was spoken by a third-party president. Abraham Lincoln was the last third-party president we've ever had for 13 score and 7 years. For 13 score and 7 years, we've had Republicans and Democrats. And that's how we've known this world. And 13 score and 7 years later, the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party himself, seeing bodies before him of fallen Americans and given a chance to speak, here are his words, quoting Twitter: "Appreciate the congrats on being right about radical Islamic terrorism. I don't want congrats. I want toughness and vigilance. We must be smart." 13 score and 7 years ago, when asked to give a speech about the fallen soldiers at Gettysburg, Lincoln did not say, "I appreciate the congrats on people saying that Southerners are jerks, but I don't want congrats right now. We just need to be tougher and more vigilant." No. That's not what the Republican Party started on. That's not the note that the Republican Party was in. But yet 13 score and 7 years later, here we have this man on Twitter giving shame, deep shame doing the most shameful thing you can ever possibly do. Using the deaths of your citizens in order to push for your power and to push a political narrative. That is absolutely, positively, just beyond anything. And two, I usually don't tweet celebrities. I never tweet celebrities. It's like talking to a brick wall. They don't care what you have to say. You're just a normal person. Everyone else is tweeting at them, and they don't have time to read all your responses. But I had to respond to this one. And the only clip and thought that I could present was a clip of a congressman at a hearing going, "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you no sense of decency?" No sense of decency. This is beyond even that. At least McCarthy was an empathizable character. At least he did what he was doing and felt what he was doing was right. And people could see that, maybe he was scared of communism, and maybe he was scared. And maybe Trump is scared of Islam. Maybe he's really scared, and maybe he thinks he's doing the right thing. Maybe he's more empathizable than I'm giving him credit for. But this, appreciating congratulations on the deaths of 50 Americans, no. No political party should be for that, and no political party should ever stand behind this. Because 13 score and 7 years ago, there was also 2 political parties. But guess what? Neither of them won because they were both fundamentally wrong about the thing that the people believed was the right for blacks and whites to be free. They had a fundamental disagreement with both parties at the time about this. And you don't think it can happen again? You don't think you think that that's some historical fluke because it happened 13 score and 7 years ago? Mr. Trump and Miss Clinton? You think this is something? Miss Clinton, the Democrat Party's fine. They're doing fine. Despite the differences amongst them, I still feel that there's a sense of togetherness. That Bernie will pull some of the party back together. But the Republican Party right now, historically, and just knowing history as much as I do, this is their most vulnerable point in their existence for 13 score and 7 years. There is no reason that God-fearing, moral Republicans should support this man. And the reason I say this is because, can you name me a difference between Donald Trump and the shooter, Omar? Can you name me a difference? The only difference I can personally think of is economic background. They both share the same religion. And don't give me that, he's Christian, he's Muslim. No. They are both study at the same church. And that church is the church of narcissism. Narcissism in which you are the most important thing in the room. You are the most important thing, and you must build for you and you alone, and that's it. Doesn't matter. Everything else is an NPC. Everything else is a little pawn in your game to become famous, to have political power, to be known. And that is not what we should expect. We should never allow that. Can you say for certain, if Omar had the finances and the fiscal background and just basically the starting point that Donald Trump had, that he would not do the same thing, that he would put his name on the biggest of towers? To me, these men are the same because they both used these corpses in order to try and promote themselves. And to me, there's no difference. So am I calling Donald Trump a terrorist, you're saying? Yes. Yes, I am. I am calling him terrorist Trump. And you're saying that seems outlandish. That seems stupid. That is absolutely the dumbest thing I have ever possibly heard. Well, if you believe that, I have some bullet points that I would like to go over with you. Point by point thing. Trump has a history of using litigation in order to fiscally intimidate individuals. Now, that might not seem like terrorism, and that certainly isn't talked about as terrorism within the American context because, people have the right to sue one another. But if you're suing people who don't have the financial strength to fight back, to me, that's invoking terror. To me, that's trying to intimidate using factors, using weapons, using something that you cannot fight against. If you are threatening the livelihood and stability and fiscal stability and livelihood of another individual human being just because they made you upset, just because they did something silly, they made a joke about you, so you're going to threaten them with lawsuits, that's fiscal terrorism. It's trying to scare individuals from being themselves in order to just to make yourself feel better about yourself. It's no different than killing someone in the name of some god. It's no different in my mind. But that might be a stretch, you say. That's a stretch. All right. Trump has claimed the desire to use torture. And the reason he says we should do it is because, they're doing it. The terrorists are doing it, so we must use the tools of the terrorists against terrorism. We must do this, he says. Why? Are you going to do it yourself, Mr. Trump, or are you going to have our soldiers do it? I think our soldiers have been through enough of this bull. Don't you? You're asking our soldiers to inflict harm upon their own morality, to be more suicidal than they already are, to deal with things that are soul-crushing and agitating and you cannot expect that from them without dealing it yourself. You know what? You want to torture them, Mr. Trump? Be a man and do it yourself. Don't ask other good men to do it for you and crush their souls and put themselves through just the greatest of moral stress and greatest demoralization. You should talk to any soldier who worked under the Bush administration who had been in those areas. It sticks with you forever, having to ask you to inflict that kind of harm onto other human beings. No one should ever enjoy something like that. And those who do might end up being terrorists. So another thing is that Trump has said that Mexico will pay for a wall for the U.S., and he'll figure out a way to do it through intimidation, right? How else are you going to do it? He said, we'll affect trading agreements and stuff like that. I'll use trading agreements as leverage. If you're going to use that much fiscal thing where they would pay for an entire wall for billions of dollars, Mexico is going to pay for our billions of dollars worth of wall. You better bring some strong things, man. And if those things are that strong, if it's billions and billions and billions of dollars you're talking about, just in normal trade, the trade to me should be open between citizens of countries. The government should not really have too much involvement. Some, because they got to make sure nothing weird's going over the borders, but not like to the point where you're crushing basically an entire country. We've crushed Mexico enough, sir. We've done enough to them through our policies, all right? That's a whole nother story, but to me, you're saying we should terrorize Mexico into building a wall for us. We should use terrorist tactics in order to scare them into building a wall for us. Maybe if you terrorize them enough, they might get so scared of us they will build up a wall. Keep us the heck out. Or keep us, because we're going to probably be trying to flood their borders if you're going to use the same tactics on your own citizens. Speaking of which, Trump has frequently encouraged supporters to attack protesters. Now, you can just say, violent protesters, okay. But most of these people are just wearing signs and being jerks. And instead of allowing security to just pull them out, people would pop them on. He encourages people, don't be easy on, punch them, hit them. Okay? If somebody is speaking out against a policy that you're putting up as president, are you going to tell your supporters, shut him up, punch him? How, you're taking advantage of anger within the audience of America in order to try and trigger something with them. Just like people take advantage of anger in people in other nations and create groups like ISIS. And quite frankly, Mr. Trump, I don't believe a terrorist organization should be a political party in the United States of America. I'm just saying, if you want to take advantage of the fervor and the anger in individuals in order to try and create a angry and debase and immoral party that will use violence and intimidation against other people in the same nation, what is the difference then between the Republican Party and ISIS? Because ISIS does the same damn thing, just so you're aware. Next on the list, and this is probably the most egregious, and why I saved it for last. Trump has encouraged that we should go after the families and friends and social network of terrorists. Now, he's sort of backpedaled on this one, but he let it out there. He let it out there. And this is the most damning one. And you know why it's the most damning one? Because it legitimizes 9/11. And what am I talking about? Let's go down this rabbit hole. Yeah, in order to make sure that people don't, commit heinous acts on their own, we'll go after their families. We'll go after their children. If somebody is doing something we disagree with, your friends, your social network, they're all on the line. The people closest to you, the people you care about, they are merely pawns in our little game of trying to intimidate and keep this particular thing silenced, or to try and stem terrorism. Seems nice, doesn't it? But here's the thing. Terrorists who would legitimize 9/11 and say, well, and said, hey, they're saying, but we killed them and they're civilians? And that was immoral what we did because they're civilians? There's no such thing. Civilians pay taxes, and those taxes go to their government, and their government does the things that we don't want you doing. So why should we attack their government when we can attack the resources in which they're getting things taken from them? We should not attack the government in a war. We should attack the civilians. That is their proposal. That is their thing. There is no difference between the American civilian and the American government. There's no difference between the American civilian and the American army or the military. There is no difference in their mind. They are one and the same. They are the social network of them. So they will attack, they will kill any American because they're just part of the whole thing. So that logic is similar, isn't it? We don't like what that terrorist is. We don't like the people in ISIS. So instead of going after ISIS in battle, what we'll do is we'll go after their families. We'll instead attack their families. We'll find some hut somewhere where they all live in and blow it up. All right? So that seems legit, right? No, it doesn't. It does not. Trump, you may think you're a winner, but you will become, in this case, in one tweet, the nation's biggest loser. Because I will say this as well. You and Omar have this thing in common in this shooting. You used this tragedy in order to promote yourself and to promote your cause. The Republican Party should not be using tragedies in order to promote their causes. And I don't mean guns, and I don't mean any of that. I mean just promoting a candidate. Not even policies, not even ideas. Ideas and policies are different than people. If you're using a tragedy to promote yourself as a person, it's unfathomable. It's unheard of in American politics. I am strapped to think of anything even remotely similar to this. I am hard-pressed. And I think that everyone in the Republican Party, particularly the leadership, needs to ask themselves this hard question. Why do you continue to support terrorist Trump? Yes, I said it. Terrorist Trump. That is his name. That will be what he is remembered as. This man, by any other cloth, by any other time, by growing up in any other conditions, without money, without power, he would seek it any way he possibly could in the narcissistic way he has shown here. Because he just said himself, I appreciate the congratulations on these 50 dead Americans filling into my political narrative and making it easier for me to get into power. Happy me! 7 years ago, a man would have been ashamed of you. He would have been ashamed to have any title, to have any even connection with a political party that would allow such destructive thoughts, such heinous thoughts. Lincoln is rolling in his grave. His ghost stirs at these words, at this tweet. Appreciate this disgusting Trump. Disgusting. You may defend yourself as you have every right to. You will claim that no way I'm a terrorist because I haven't killed anyone. Or nothing I've said has led to the death of anyone. But the words that you've said and the wish that you have makes me want nothing to do with you having any control of our military. For that is what the commander-in-chief since the beginning of the founding of this nation has been in charge of. That is their main purpose, to know where our sword goes, to know where our military and strength goes. That is their most important job. And to you, you're just going to use it to intimidate other people. You're going to use it for your own ends. Your ends justify your means as long as America is number one. You will intimidate, you will get angry, you will file lawsuits, you will do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. But guess what? So will the terrorists. Because terrorists do whatever it takes, right? They don't have the manpower, they don't have the guns, they don't have the government, they don't have the infrastructure. But they do whatever it takes. Because then the ends justify the means. And the Republican Party has to ask themselves this question. It is the fundamental and moral divide, just as the Whig Party had back in the 1800s. Yeah, the last time we had a two-party system. And they only lasted 50. They didn't even last 50. The Republican Party's lasted 7 years. It's an accomplishment. It's a long-running party. But to those in that party, you have a lot of thinking to do. And you have a fundamental thought to have. And that is, do you stand by this man? Because if you do, I think 7 years was a pretty good run. But it's over. The Libertarian Party, like the Republican Party before it, will take over whatever second party there is. And it's your party that's going to go. Because yours is the one that has the fundamental divide on what we will do as a nation, of what defines our character, and what defines who we are. Just as the Whig Party did before. Just as their disagreements on whether or not we should keep slave-owning states formed a divide in their ranks. 7 years later, you are facing a similar moral divide. A deep moral divide. One that you will have to answer for yourselves at the voting booths. If you believe that America should be better than the terrorists, if you believe that America should use its military only when it's necessary, only when it needs to be utilized, and certainly not to kill the friends and families of people who lose their way and become terrorists. To not use the same terrorist tactics. That we use our resources of military might better and more morally than the terrorists. And we may fail sometimes, we may make mistakes, but we don't purposefully do this. We don't do this with intent. And if people do it with intent, those individuals are prosecuted. Those individuals are brought to justice because what they did was wrong. You need to decide that, Republican Party. You need to decide real quick. Because if you don't decide, and if your people don't put themselves between Trump and seed that word that we are different, that we will not use our military things like terrorists do, that we will not become the terrorists ourselves, that we will not fight terrorism with terrorism, if you don't believe this and you support Trump, then 13 score and 7 years was a good run, and that's all there is for you. The Libertarian Party will replace you. And I will do everything in my power to empower the Libertarian Party to make 25% of the vote this election. Because it is plausible. So plausible. I have studied the American political system for over a decade. I understand its quandaries, its quirks. I know how to empower individuals. I know how to do this because that's what I've studied for years. And I will gladly give my videos, I will gladly give time to these videos every week to ensure that I lay out a battle plan for the Libertarian Party in order to take 25%. And I'll have them take from both parties, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump aside. And if you as Republican voters are going to get angry at me for oh, you're going to split up the vote, you're going to take our vote away from us, you're going to let Hillary win. No, you let Hillary win by voting this maniac terrorist Trump be your presumptive nominee. Don't blame me for your mistakes. Your anger, your vitriol, and your rage and your morality are sorely misplaced. But for those who would like to know more, I will be presenting these if the Republican Party does not distance itself from terrorist Trump. And that's all I have to say for this video. Sorry for the rant.